Okay, one thing that I'm very lucky about is that I do work with a lot of structural engineers, architects, specifiers and homeowners. Now, you learn all different aspects of where they're coming from and things like this when you come towards repairing buildings. Well,
forward.
Okay, forward, backward. Okay, thank you. Okay. Just a minute. Is that having a wealth of experience of coming from England and working on a lot of historic buildings in England, and my accolade that I really like to look back on is that I had a chance to work on York Wall in England that was built by the Romans, which was 2,000 years old. And they were the first great brick masons as far as I'm concerned, with the arch, viaducts and things like that. And as it spread across Europe, different types of masonry and things like that, eventually the settlers came over here, and as we know, different types of architecture was brought about, and there was no set standards in those days. So I got called into a building, a house, and this is just an outstanding house that I really fell in love with, called the Bomar House, and it's in Gainesville, Texas, and it was built in 1909. Now, the thing that we got called in for, I got called in for, was to assess damaged chimneys, cracked brickwork, arch repair and repointing thin mortar joints. Let's have a look. Forward. This is the house itself. The historic Bomar House in Gainesville, Texas is situated near the town square. It is a two-story residential house built of brick and stone. This view is of the front elevation of the house that was built in 1909 by Dr. Bomar. The house itself is just amazing because it sits on a foundation of stone. And the stone was quarried from a local quarry that was 20 miles away. But this is where it got interesting, because I was able to get hold of an original specification of the architect's outlay. There was no drawings, it was all handwritten. And the stones, the foundation stones themselves, were cut into lengths of 7 to 8 feet long, 3 feet wide. That's a big lump of stone. And it was bedded on 6 inches of sand. And it was held together with a mortar mix of fresh burnt Austin white lime mix with good clean sand. And this is where it came into play, was that it was an 1/8 of best brand Portland cement. Now, Portland cement was just starting to come into its own and been brought in to America and brought down south. So this was interesting because it was a transition from, as Mike said, from the lime and sand mortar to giving it a bit more strength. And in the specification on the actual foundation stones, all mortar joints were not to exceed 1/4 of an inch. That's quite a specification. The bricks themselves, the facing bricks, these bricks were from Coleyville, Kansas, and they were laid in a color red dye mortar to match the bricks, and the bed joint was not to exceed 3/16 of an inch, which is very tight, and for a good mason, that's a challenging all round to keep it like that. Well, I'm lucky because I've got a good mason in the audience. And it was all to be bonded together with a headed course of brickwork every 6 courses in English garden bond. Now what that means is that there's 6 courses running horizontally, and then they turn the bricks every 6 courses across to key in the brickwork. Now normally this works in a double wide wall, Except that this building was different, and this is what I liked about it. On first floor, the walls were 17 inches thick. That's this wide. Sitting on top of this beautiful, big, wide foundation bed. The front steps led to a beautiful walkway, and when you got into the walkway, it was all inlaid with beautiful mosaic. So when you come around and walked all the way around, it was beautiful. Beautiful style, Corinthian style columns around there. The second story was done beautifully with corbelled cast stone, coming out cut stone, with the same again with the actual beautiful columns to the front with an apex. And then with 5 beautiful, beautiful big chimneys all sitting on top of the roof. The house itself was very well maintained over the years. But the customer had concerns about bricks falling into the garden. This is at the rear of the house. This is the original Carriage house. And I sort of look at it, and people say to me, it's like a movie set. It really is, because I can imagine them coming out there with the horses, giddy up, and the servants living up top and things like this. Well, the Carriage house itself, they wanted to repair, but the problem is that in years gone by, there was a church next door to it, and that the tree itself had just got a huge, big and old, but then it started to get old, so they had to cut it down. But it was in the base of the foundation, and what it did, it twisted the whole building, literally just twisted it around. And one of the main areas that fell down is above the smiley face, because it always reminds me of a blooming smiley face. All this section on the archwork had started to drop down. So there was a considerable amount of damage done to the building, and the owners were unsure whether they wanted to reinstate it, knock it down, or make it into a garage to park the cars. Now the customers were looking for options long-term, how to deal with this, and the mindset, as I say, was to tear it down and build it into a new one, but I'm trying to smooth talk them not to, because it's too beautiful. When we first met the customers, their main concerns were for bricks that they'd found in the garden. And they were like, where's these bricks coming from? Because they had a young child that played in the garden, and bricks falling down from above were a concern. So I said to them, first of all, my approach was to do an investigation of all the buildings on the property and offer repair strategies and a cost for each one, because each job is always restricted by budget. And we understand that, the customer understands that, but then it's hard to actually come up and prioritise repairs for the brickwork or any works. So, I needed to see what the problem was with the chimneys. Now, looking from ground level allows you to see some problems, but not up close. If you can get up close and you can see it on a bird's eye view, it's much better. But when you're looking up, you're tending to see, is that or is it not? Is that shadow? Is it cast? Or things like that. So for this, I acquired a boom lift to get close to it. Because I'm getting old. I didn't need to get up there on ladders. So, to get a boom lift, this is great. It's a great piece of equipment, but you've got to take in some considerations. And one of these is, you've got to have a good machine operator. Because if you're coming close to a chimney that's already in disrepair, one little move and you can knock it and the whole chimney's gone through the roof. So I needed to get up there and have a look at this. Oh, and here's one. If you ever get a boom lift and you hear the operator saying, I think I can get you up there and I think I can get you close, think again. Make sure. It's a little bit late when you're up there. Ooh. Okay, let's have a look. And when you're driving across the yard, make sure that track mats are put down, because this prevents the lawn being torn up. And one thing you find is with these nice houses, they always have the beautiful lawns. You can play croquet down them. They're absolutely beautiful. And you forget, oh, no problem, I'll just drive it across. It'll not make a dent. Yes, it does. Also as well, find out where the sprinklers are located. And have a landscape company on standby. Because one thing you do find is that they have beautiful, beautiful flowers and landscaping that they take great pride of. And they get really upset if you start tearing up their plants. So, to the next slide. With the boom lift extended, I could see the problem. And I think you all can as well. The chimney on the left, the crown itself had started to literally fall apart. Also, in years gone by, it had been repointed, but it had only been repointed across the surface. As Mike said, it wasn't the usual 2 times width of the mortar joint depth in. They'd just skimmed across the outside, which with 3/16 joints, you can understand, is pretty hard work to do. Now, the chimney on the left had the same problems with the crowns, and it was leaning, so I wanted to take it down, actually. But the customer, I explained to the customer the situation. I said that I wanted to take the chimneys, both of them, down halfway, so that I could build them up, and it'd have a bit of strength rather than just round the top, because I was concerned that a repair patch on this just certainly wouldn't go anywhere. One thing to take into consideration that I never took into consideration on this job was that the customer said, well, can we get up on the roof and do this? I said, well, certainly, but what I need is a safe, solid area to work on, so let's get some scaffolding. The scaffolding quotes came back over $20,000. Now, that's a big piece of budget to take into consideration. So the customer was there going, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I thought, well, I need to help them because this is a very intricate job. So the customer asked me and said, do you think you could do the work from a boom lift and it would reduce the cost of scaffolding? I said I had enough skill set to operate this type of equipment, and I said yes, which I've got a habit of doing that. I've got to stop doing that. And I must admit that it certainly isn't for an amateur to work in a boom lift, because you do get some sway and it takes a bit of getting used to, and you move a little bit here and then it moves afterwards. So you've got to get used to the actual piece of the equipment. Now, here's a picture of the rear of the house. As I said, this house was just exquisite. I fell in love with this house. At the rear of the house, it has a walk-under porch, a glass screen porch on the second story, and little things that you don't think of when you start taking on a job like this, because there was no engineering on this. I had to figure all this out because they said, no, we've asked a few people and they don't know what they're doing, but you do, so can you come up with a repair strategy? I said, yeah, and you're trying to think of about 1,000 things all going on. And one of them was to actually cut the fence, to get this piece of equipment into the back. And on the right, you've got the pump house, the old original pump house where they had a well and the pump took water to the house. And you've got electrical cables, you've got trees, you've got this beautiful porch out the back. And we had to get this machinery up, across and in, as I said, again with the mats. So what I did was, up on the chimney, I came up with a net that went all the way around the chimney. Imagine this is a chimney. I put these braces out and we put a mesh net all the way around so that if any debris came down, it was caught and not dropped. Plus as well, it had a new roof, so we didn't want any damage to the roof. So great care and attention was paid to actually make sure that nothing fell. My repair strategy to the lads was this: stay focused and remember what we're doing. There's no room for error on this one. So what we did is we took the crowns down and rebuilt the crowns. Now you'll notice that this has still got mortar on the brickwork. And if you look closely, what you will see on this, where we took the crown down, is they're not quite the same matching bricks yet. We haven't cleaned and washed these off with the mortar yet. But what we did is that because there was a shortage of bricks, Coleyville, Kansas brick are now collector's item. They sell them on eBay for single units because they're old and they've got shale in them, beautiful bricks, and people like them. Seems to be a fascination for bricks. So what I did was that we went to Acme and worked closely with Acme to get a brick called a Yankee Hill brick that matched. Now, they were oversized, and what we had to do was cut them down to match, but they had perforations because the original bricks had no perforations. It was just like a paver. So this, with the perforations on top, I was glad, because it's like if you built it with Lego. It interlocks with the mortar and between the bricks and give it some good structural sound cap around the top. So I was happy with that. So what did I do with the existing brick? I took them down because nobody looks up. And I kept them because I had to do some, was it Suchi Gucci? Oochie Coochie. I had to do a bit of Oochie Coochie, and we'll come to that down the line. Okay. So nobody ever looks up at the chimneys, and we knew that if we could match it close enough from there, it'd be fine. But I've got to tell you a story, and I've got to tell you this little story quick. When I was in England, I was going out with this girl, and she had a beautiful old historic house down in Yorkshire. Well, she'd had some roofing work done, and a contractor who didn't know what he was doing said, "You need to repair your chimney." So she said, "Oh, okay, go ahead." And then I came around to a house, and I let myself in. I was in the military, and I came back on leave, I think, and I let myself into the house. And she said that she'd had some work done on the chimney, and I didn't think about it until I walked past the room. And you know when you walk past the door and something catches your eye? Huh? Well, she had beautiful white carpets, she had beautiful white, nice couches, she had everything else, until a brick went down the chimney, came all the way down, an old coal fire, hit the bottom, and it went poof. And it was, in a way, it was a work of art, because this soot just went in streaks and things all over the furniture and absolutely everywhere. And I thought, oh, how am I going to explain that one? I'm glad it wasn't me. But if you ever do a job on a chimney, or you know someone that's going to get a job done on a chimney, make sure that the fireplace itself is sealed and taped all the way around, and as a precautionary measure, put in some sponge, just in case a bit of debris comes down. But remember with that one, trust me, it's important. Whew. Yeah, that was... No, what they'd done, they'd capped them off down the bottom, and they didn't have it as a working one anymore. It could have, yes, and a bit of wear and tear, but as well, don't forget, it's 100 years old. You've got high winds in Texas. We've got tornadoes. We've got rain. We've got driving rain. And hanging around in Texas 5 minutes and it'll change. I'm learning. So, where are we at? Let's get back on this. So I told the story about the chimney. Okay. So, this is the chimney. When we did it, and we washed it with Show Clean. And we matched the actual joints, and what we did is we repointed the actual chimneys. However, this is where I had to prove a point, as usual, because people tell you can't, and I don't like being told I can't. So the historic preservation brief, which I understand is very, very good, and it is good, saying about with a hand and a chisel to chip out mortar. Now, one thing that when you come within 3/16 joints, we know that they're very, very thin joints. So even with the greatest care, with a hammer and chisel, you've got a strong chance of actually damaging the bricks. So I had to come up with an idea. So I made a machine to cut out the bed joints. And on the header joints, what I did is that we don't use a grinder to grind out between the vertical joints because it cuts the top and the bottom of the brick. I designed a little system that works on an oscillating tool with a diamond blade that just gently vibrates it out of place. So I could get the depth that I needed to repoint. All right. What I did do was I discussed with the customer, and it's something I see in Texas a lot with high chimneys, and I think that one of the lads had a picture where it was the chimney was laid on top, or was it Disaster, on Ben's, where the chimney was laid on top of the roof. So what I did was I designed a brace around the chimney with a bar coming down, a nut and bolt on the top so it got an angle, and even put a bit of ornate raw ironwork to bring the character back into place. I braced all the chimneys back into place, so if any high winds came, it'd be okay, at least be able to support it and help it. Okay, so that with the chimneys and the high work on that level done, the customer themselves had a problem with one of the corners dropping due to a bit of foundation movement, and it was on an arch. The arch itself was situated on the corner, and by the way, this beautiful walkway on this balcony was just exceptional. The water from the fall pipes here and down the other side of the building, and they also installed a swimming pool, so excess moisture was being washed out into the corner. And when it rained, a lot of water pooled on the other side of the wall. This, over the years, had caused it, because it was solid and 17-inch, to twist and buckle. And the first place that it went was on the outside masonry veneer that was keyed in. So it twisted it on the arch, just above, on the top there. So I came up with a repair strategy that what we needed to do was take out the arch at the top and bring it back into place and then feather the brickwork around. The customer said, "Do you think you can do any foundation repair work on it?" And I said, "No, because of the size of the foundation footings and 17 inches of brickwork at first floor and 13 inches on the top, that's a lot of weight. It's not a little lightweight building that can just jack up with a steel pin or anything like that." So they said, "Well, what do you think you can do?" So I said that we should take out the centre stone, take out the brickwork on the top, and feather it back, which is where we lay it back incrementally to bring it back up level and patch, so we didn't have to just patch any cracks and leave it. So in a form of it, it is removing brickwork and putting brickwork back that we needed to do, but in incremental measures so that it all lined up. What we did is we set up scaffolding, and we got in. I decided that I wanted to take the centre stone out first. Once the centre stone had been taken out, then I could remove the external layer of masonry and bring it back into place. Now, one thing that Mike pointed out, and the lads, is that water is a problem, because the secondary bricks at the back, as you can see, are not as beautifully laid with 3/16. It's more of it thrown together on a backfill and built up back into place. So once the centre stone was done, what I decided to do was remove bricks segmentally and then start putting it back into place, getting the correct levels. I wasn't happy with just putting the bricks back, so what I did is, where the circles are, these are called the headers that are keyed back in, and they're every 6 courses, which is then related to Cold English Garden Bond. What I did was I installed stainless steel, thin threaded bars at segments going back up above the arch, which then what it does is it gives it some strength in the future across here and across here. Normally you go about a foot either side of the arch to allow it to spread and give it some strength. So now it was time to realign the masonry. We did that side, we came on this side, and the customer said that what they wanted to do was repoint the whole right-hand side section because they'd noticed that they were getting a few damp patches coming in to the building. Oh, time ticking away. I'm getting too excited here. Time's ticking away. I've got to move on. So what we did was these areas here where water had been penetrating in, you could see where effervescence had started, and the dark stains here were where we needed to actually get in, repoint, and stop moisture getting in. When it did twist on this corner, it caused stress-bound fractures up there, and there's one of the high chimneys, so you can see how hard it was to get access to it, and that is actually braced itself. One thing that I will stipulate is that when you've got workers working in any type of form of restoration, make sure they have a solid platform. I have seen a lot of workers where they're just hanging off on a bit of an old ladder or something, no problem, and it's not good. You only need to come off a ladder once or someone get hurt, and it doesn't matter what great work you did, it's all forgotten about. Okay. Oh yeah. Let's move these out the way. Okay. So the next phase on this section was to grind out the mortar beds. And I know that we say that you can't. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can if you know what you're doing. And there's not many people that do know what they're doing. If you look here, this is a section that are ground out. Oh, by the way, the top section's already been ground out and repointed. And it was with the matching mortar, with a bit of Portland cement, fine white sand, and some lime. That was on the original specification with a colour mix that give it a beautiful red tinge. Now, when we come to the mortar joints themselves and the headers, as you can see, no cuts, no skips, just beautiful lines all the way down. There's not many people that can do it, but I proved a point. It can be done. This machine is proprietary of Specialized Masonry Restoration. Okay. So, here we are taking the scaffolding back down, and this area here was where we've repointed. Beautiful. Now then, what had happened was that the fall pipe here had been causing problems because it went into the ground and nobody knew where it went. Oh, I'm not sure where it goes, which is typical because it's out of sight, it's out of mind. But one of the areas, and this was the area that had me concerned, because in the corners it had literally just separated and cracked. So we needed to remove the bricks and put the brickwork back in. So we scoochie-goochied it. And when we did, we brought that back into the corner. Now then, with it dropping on the corner, we had a stress line fracture that came out here and dropped and was very unsightly. So what I wanted to do was remove the brickwork from there back to here and line it back up and match it with mortar, because we were repointing all these sections so that you couldn't see where it had been. What was funny was, well, to me it was funny, and also anybody else I'm sure, was that down below we had 17 inches of brickwork, but up on the balcony section, just around this area, it switched to a double wyeth wall, still with the headers, so we had to be very careful that this didn't fall in. Now you can see where we started to cut out the joints to start removing the brickwork. And here what we're doing is we're laying it back and getting our lines so that we can feather the brickwork back into place so that it all looks uniformly done. The headers themselves that are sticking out with the arrows to the side, they help key the bricks back into place. Okay, 15. Back into place. Oh yeah, now this took a bit of figuring out. Here's your Coffeyville brick. And you notice that it's not like a modern day brick that it's got holes or perforations in it. It's flat, it's like a paver. Now, when you get a good mason who knows what he's doing to lay thin joints like this, they don't lay a uniform 1/4 of an inch joint. It's 3/16, so they tend to call butter in the joints. And you usually go 4 corners and a bit on the edge, and then the brickwork back on top, so that it allows it to be able to condense it to the 3/16 joint. But it wasn't until we actually started removing the mortar that it clicked. Here you can see pockets. Because when they'd only done a little bit on the edge, it had started to erode. When you got a lot of water down, it would migrate, and as water does, it finds its own way down and in. And these are the areas, and this is why brickwork needs repointing. Because repointing is a building's first line of defense. It's designed to be sacrificial to the brick, but it does have to be repaired. And as Mike said, to do the investigation, it could be rough sand, wash sand, white sand, gravel sand. You have to know what you're working with so that it all gets back in and just matches. You can't just mix it up and hope for the best. Let's have a look. Okay. Here, we're on the last phase. We've come all the way down the side of the building. And what I wanted to do was just show you that when we got it all boarded up, we repointed back up to here. But you can see the cuts all the way across. And what I wanted to do was to highlight it, to show that it can be done with machinery, not by hand, chisel, a bad operator that kicks out with a grinder. And I must admit, I don't like grinders and bad operators because they really can damage a building, and the aesthetics are really important when you do have any beautiful kind of historic building. You don't want to see it slashed about a bit. So there, that is one thing that I was able to do, was cut the bed joints out like that. When cleaning brickwork, a lot of contractors I've seen, or so-called masonry repair specialists, I'll say just get some acid. So they go down Home Depot and they buy some 100 crockets, a bit of that, and oh yeah, we've got to put a bit of water in. What they don't understand is that if it's too acidic, you can burn the brickwork. And burning the brickwork is not good in any way. So I tend to move more of a light cleaning solution, brick cleaning solution. But what we did is that when we did wash it all off, I was able to achieve this. Me, I was happy with that. Actually, so were the customers. Not only with the pointing, and I could go on with this job for a lot longer, but due to time restrictions, I've got to close this up. Things that you sort of think of is that this was the pump house. Beautiful pagoda roof and everything, but what it was that because of the arches on top, and it had moved a little bit on the foundation, it was sort of starting to twist on the arches. And you can see above the door entryway the damage that had occurred up here. So the repair strategy that I came up was gently cut the bricks out, re-arch them, and repoint them back into place. I know we've covered a lot on this very, very fast, but that was one amazing project. And it was challenging, as they all are, and me having to sit there and do the paperwork and everything else to get all this done and come up with those strategies is rather hard. And the customers always, if anything goes wrong, well, you should have known. It's hard to know everything. But if you do know enough, you can do this. So there is a lot of hope for historic buildings. It just needs a lot of forethought, a lot of planning, and a lot of things to do. But that's my case study, and I hope you found it interesting. Thank you very much.